Last week we talked about shoulder slope, and you're going to remember that this pattern is the one that I used to demonstrate things on, and this was the result of the shoulder slope on this particular pattern. Now, if you missed that video, I want you to go back and watch it. It will give you all the intricacies of how to determine the shoulder slope on a pattern that already works for you. Now this week there was lots of questions about how to actually use this information to apply it to other sewing patterns. So what I wanted to do is to demonstrate how you can figure out the degree of slope on a shoulder slope that already works for you, and then hopefully understand how to apply it to other sewing patterns. So what you're going to need to do this is a protractor. Now a protractor is definitely something that you will measure degrees of slope by. A protractor is basically half a circle. So most of us know in sewing that a 90-degree angle is always a perpendicular line. So in other words, it's 90-degree angle or a right angle. And most of us also know about 45-degree angles. That's a bias cut of the grain. Now we can use this information and this protractor to determine the slope that we have on the shoulder that the pattern actually works for you. Now, when you find the degree of slope, you can use that degree measurement on any pattern that you choose, regardless of where the neck point is on the garment. So I wanted to demonstrate that to you today. So this was last week's tutorial, and I'm going to then trace this information onto a separate piece of paper so that it's all a little bit clearer. So let me bring that in next. Okay, so now all I've done here is simply copied what I had on the previous image. So you can see here that I have the desired shoulder slope that I found was working for me on the particular garment I was working on. This is the grain line, or a line that is parallel to the grain line that intersects with the neck point. And then I'm going to also intersect a line that is perpendicular to that particular grain line. So you can see here, this is my desired shoulder slope, this is the grain line intersecting with the neck point, and this is the perpendicular line that is to the neck point and to the grain line. So what I'm going to do now is figure out what the degree of slope this particular shoulder slope is on the pattern that's working for me. So what I'm going to do is simply take my protractor and lay the center line of the protractor on the grain line, which is intersecting with the neck point, and the horizontal line here that's at the 0 point along the perpendicular to grain line. Now when I do that, I've got a right angle, 90-degree angle that's going between this line and this line. Now I can figure out what my degree of slope is on the shoulder that is working for me, simply by measuring it using this protractor. So I can see here that when I place my protractor on this shoulder line, that I have a degree of 26. So this particular line is 26 degrees from the perpendicular line that is extending from the grain line. Now, this is the information that you can use to transfer to any pattern that you are choosing, regardless of where the neck point is. So I want to bring in an example of that so that you can see that regardless of what the position is of the neck point, the degrees of the slope doesn't change at all. Okay, so on this particular image, I've got two neck point positions that I'm going to demonstrate this on. So first of all, you can see this green line, which is indicating the original neck point that we talked about. This is the slope that I copied from the original pattern that I felt was working for me. Now, if I have a sewing pattern that has a neck point that's closer to my neckline than the one that was working for me, I can simply extend that shoulder slope line toward the neckline of the pattern, and then I can pick those two intersecting points again that are parallel to the grain line and intersecting with the neck point, and then a line that is perpendicular to that grain line and also intersecting with that slope. and the grain line. So I have this point here, I have a 90-degree angle, and I have my shoulder slope that I want to achieve. Once again, I can take my protractor and simply place my protractor at that 90-degree point, and I will find that even if my neck point is closer to my neck, I still have a 26-degree slope on this particular line. So again, that 26 degrees is going to work if that neck point of the pattern is sitting closer to the neckline. Now here is the example of the neck point sitting further away from the neckline. So in this example, which I put in red here, is the neck point is actually sitting lower on the slope. But again, when you use those same principles of intersecting the grain line with the neck point and then drawing a perpendicular line to that grain line, you are still going to achieve that 26-degree slope. So this is the information that you need. You need to know what the degree of slope is in order to transfer that information to other sewing patterns. So you can see here that even though the neck point is further out, that we have 26-degree slope on the line that we want to actually achieve. So in other words, this green line is our desired shoulder slope, and we can transfer it to any pattern by using the degree of slope for each of the patterns that we're using. Now, using what we just learned about the shoulder slope and using the degree of shoulder slope on many sewing patterns, you can actually determine the shoulder slope of the back and the front separately. So for those patterns that actually have a different slope on each the front and the back, you can actually figure out what the degree of slope is on the back and the degree of slope on the front, and then you can apply those once again to many other sewing patterns. Always figuring out the intersection between the neck point and the grain line, and the neck point and a line that is perpendicular to that grain line. So these intersecting points at the neck point is the most important one, and then you're going to use your protractor to figure out what the degree of slope is on each of those front and back pattern pieces, so then you can apply that to any sewing pattern that you choose. Did you enjoy this video? If you'd like to see more like this, let me know. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel or visit me on Instagram at InHouse Patterns. When you comment, like, follow, and share on these platforms, you'll get more of what you love in your feed and help others to find the content too. I'll chat with you soon. Bye for now.